Muy bien, señoras y señores, este escenario se ha acondicionado porque vienen más invitados.
We have more guests about part of this agenda. This is an essential topic for the present and the future of our sector. Expert panel, evolution and revolution in insurance regulations. We have new threats, new emerging technologies. Regulations should stop being a break. You should be an ally of growth and trust. That's why this panel have relevant voices that help us to analyze how regulation can be transformed, including adaptation before uncertain times. Jorge Clot, President, Inter-American Fides Insurance Company. Engineer Luis Enrique Bandera, Superintendent of Insurance and Underwriters in Panama. Don Enrique, welcome. Kevin Lucas Fulcombi, President of the Board, Association of Private Insurers of Costa Rica. Kevin, welcome again. And as a moderator, Jose Vega, member of the directory in Suralex, who will open the dialogue. Without any further delay, Don Luis, please, you have the floor. What a group of panelists. We'll talk about regulations, the excess of regulations in the Hispanic American market. I include Spain. To what extent is convenient over regulations, an excess of regulation? Regulation is an option or not? What load, the weight, and how complex are and will keep being. So the idea is to debate this matter. Jose Luis Ramirez from Paraguay, a member of Insuralex, and with Fides we have conducted a survey about the market, about the jurisdiction. Please, higher to lower regulatory issues that consume more time. How many hours do you dedicate weekly for reporting obligations in terms of regulations? What expenses this percentage we did, the area of the company that it is suffering more impact from these mandatory regulations, how it has varied in the last few years, if we have more or less regulations. Basically, we did a service with Insuralexis and Fides. 199 companies answered back. The biggest markets, Mexico and Brazil, biggest markets. So we have an idea what's going on. Issues that consume more time, biggest percentage, financial reporting, then money laundering, corporate government, market, data protection, and others will be revealed in a to be published report. Number of hours weekly to comply between 21 and 50 hours a week to comply with regulations. Percentage of the budget that the companies dedicate, annual budget, reflected 20.64 expenses just to comply reporting. In the distribution, percentual distribution, what areas are the ones who suffer more, the more? Of course, lawyers, compliance officials, 39%. Also, financial area, 29%. 16% of operations, claims, technology, and so forth. The variation of the low regulatory load increased significantly 62%, 28%, but nobody mentioned that the load was lowered. This tend to be more intense, widespread. General conclusions, growing tendency, regulatory loads as we get into the future will increase. Critical areas, financial reporting, money laundering issues, and among other things, the economic impact of the cost is relevant. 21% of the budget, it's a lot. The challenge this implies, in general, we have here, we can open a debate of how are the implications. It's a luxury to have this gentleman. Please, Jorge, what do you think about these results? Thank you for being here. Thank you, Jose Luis. Maybe it's worth it to be precise that this survey is a product of, of a previous survey that was conducted by Fides. What we did ask about the main concerns of top management right now. And by far, the regulations became the top. This is the context. That's why we did this double click to ask, where are we? What about this? So it's relevant, the question, to try to analyze to what extent what we're going through makes sense. We cannot forget, President Duque mentioned, insurance are to be part of the solution to the problems of public policies of the countries. That's our role. And for that, we have to work. We have to have time to develop markets. And what we are seeing is that the companies are asphyxiated in the day to day for complying with regulations. I don't want to go long, but I think to be precise, I'm not saying there should not be regulations. I believe that regulations are convenient, somehow provide easiness to consumers. Somebody watching, there's a capacity of response, so we'll behave well, quote unquote. So there must be a regulation, but proportional to be the right one in terms of the result. We have to remember, as always, we have to have in mind that industries, insurance companies are not banks. We, I think it's important the way of measuring regulation. It's the purpose. For what? To provide tranquility, easiness to consumers. But that's all, especially to leave spaces so top management of the companies can get over this asphyxiation and how to develop in a market where we have so many challenges and so many gaps. Yes, we always state, and this is in every jurisdiction, not just in Hispanic America. In the world, it's a regulated market. It needs to be regulated. Regulations is an issue that is bringing a lot of load in terms of money laundering. Luis Enrique, what do you think about compliance in terms of money laundering? Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with so many of you that I know. Before my answer, I take 2 minutes to mention I think my part in the conference is revolution. The message, the message of President Duque was very important. We have to look to find a new model of regulations. And listening to you remind me of the work we have been conducting in Panama, which is really seek to be an RR model, to have to go back to rationality. We have an excess of regulation, which is irrational. They have become irrational, so we have to go back, to take back rationality. From the position we have in Nassau, we are committed to work with this initiative so it becomes a Latin American tendency to bring back rationality. So your question is very good. There was a president in Panama, she only believed in the surveys of blood in fresh in blood. In the pre-survey, I was leading an insurance company. I suffered the impact of over-regulations that generated that we were in a gray or blacklist. Irrational measures were taken. We were compared, as Jorge mentioned, as a bank. We don't, you don't have the same transactionality. We have never had an issue in insurance. We don't have the same volume. So they overreact. They place a load that can be quantified. 1/5 of the expenditures of managing are dedicated just to this issue, when in reality have shown in these 10 years that these regulations have been in place, that there's no possibility for money laundering in most of our products. We began with a wrong premise to generalize from a specific experience, which is usually the reason for overregulation. It's not to tackle that problem. They apply a measure to everybody. So we fall into overregulation and we committed to go back, to get back rationality. So it's important, very important, something Jorge mentioned that we believe we have it included in our project. We have to begin, start from, nobody, insurance companies do not exist for money laundering. They should have tackled that exception they found. Our mission is not to money laundering as insurers. We cannot exaggerate. For money laundering, money comes in, money comes out. In most of our products, that's not. We don't spend money at that level. We cannot confuse frauds. Life savings in the project we are working on, we consider those two products as possible sources. The rest of the products, they must be free to grow. I'm sorry, I expand, I take more time, but it's good to recognize that we cannot leave aside protection to the consumer. It's one of our purposes. It's fundamental to reinstate the function of the regulator. We're not the police. Must be the entity that through these rational regulations help markets to develop. That's what we want. So I think I totally agree with this survey. Personally, in my country, I'm working to modify this, and I commit to have it as initiative, formal initiative for the next SAL initiative. It has enough foundation. This survey had been fabulous because it provides the dimensions to us that those of us who intuitively knew this was the case. Great, yes. If we all agree that the market must be regulated, but the position of those two products you have mentioned, something that seems rational. Also, rationality. If we talk about solvents, European model, and we are here with Kevin. Kevin, what do you think of solvents 2? Solvency 2, it's a rational model. What do you think? I will get started. Maybe that was not the question I was to get, but that was Luis Enrique's question. Solvency 2 in this survey. When you see this survey, right now in Latin America, in my case, 60% of my time is dedicated to regulations. 60% of the time I'm not using in developing the business. I'm dealing with issues that do not contribute. And President Duque come tell us, please, watch out, be careful to this modification in your countries, what it would be impacting you. But we have this regulatory law that is prescriptive, and this is how things have been doing, and it will be done. My concern is that now that we learn to do what we have to do, especially here in Costa Rica, to come to change the model, and we have to change it somehow because I need to spend more time to understand what we were doing and now what we have to do. One of the examples is for 17. I have been in this business for more than 30 years and I'm beginning to understand my financial statements. And then I have to reshuffle again how to do things. So in Solvency 2, I don't want to sound more conservative than the regulator. I think it's very important that our industry would be responsible to do things well and that our consumers, as stakeholders, to be aware of what are we doing. Solvency 2 developed in Europe. It's another world. We in Latin America, we are different in our countries. President Duque mentioned it. We all speak Spanish, but we have different accents. Sometimes we say the same with this, the same words, but it means totally different. And it happens with Solvency 2. We try to interpret it French or German, and we translate it. First, we translate it to the English, and then we translate it into Spanish, and not necessarily the spirit of Solvency 2 is reaching our regulators, or we are not interpreting as it was originally conceived as insurance policies. You have to understand, we have to focus in what really is important. As President Duque mentioned, we have 10 macro tendencies which are imminent. They are here with us. We have to focus on that. So how this spirit of Solvency II is to protect consumer, to have sufficient capital, to face the risks that we can measure and even those we cannot measure, and how our conduct is a correct conduct. I think there are different ways of doing it. not just because something worked in Europe, we have to implement it the same way in our countries. That's key. It's a key paradigm. I totally agree. I consider that not necessarily to reach. I think we need to concentrate in a supervision based on risk because every insurer is measured towards the risk it represents. But we don't have to get all the way to Solvency II. The only country I think it was in Mexico, and they found thousands of problems that it was has not been positive. So we must follow this line, and to be in our analysis should be based on risk. Reinsurance policies is different. Judges can interpret different from the British or the American judge. Jorge, going back to all of this survey, we agree there is an excess of regulatory load, but I ask you, is it feasible? Like in the superintendency that was proposed in the superintendency of Argentina, deregulate? Is it dangerous or not? What do you think? Uh, it's compromising your question. I don't have a way out. I think every excess is bad. Right now, if we were to have a using image, it's to so the population have to get a shot of penicillin in order to avoid diseases. We just need to emphasize the person who needs penicillin. We need a middle ground, middle point. It's convenient for the industry regulations because it provides trust. I think the way is not to raise everything. We need to find the proportional, the right regulation that would be convenient to each country, even to each country, because companies are different. In that sense, I agree with Luis Enrique. I think it's good to advance, especially in the schemes, supervision based on risk. Tell me what you're doing. What are your risks you're taking as a company? And as a regulator, I will tell you about the conditions. We have to begin from a base that is not obvious, but I'm convinced that insurance companies make an effort to comply with the rule, with to pay the claims, indemnizations, of course avoiding fraud, but in general, it's not an industry to have big claims. There is a feeling that they will not provide me with an answer, but when the person go to get his compensation, he does well. So we have an effort to comply. In terms of conduct, we are better than what we think. I'm not saying we don't have to do anything about market conduct, but personally, I think we talk about proportional regulations, of how to adapt to reality. We have 200 companies that answer back. We have big companies present in several countries, and some other ones very little. They have a niche in specific countries. It's different. It's not one size fits all. So I think we have to find a formula, and the formula has to be based on risk. Look into every company, what are the risks they're taking, based on that to define the level of the right capital to respond to their commitments. I'd like to add, it's important when Jorge mentions that yes, it's not just to deregulate. The concept we mentioned and we established is that we're working. We are uh, we are just cleaning. We are purifying the regulations. We have to discard what is not working based on the rationality of what should have supervision. I think there must be a supervision, that's normal, but it should be rational, it should contribute, have a cost benefit contribution. This 2022, one fifth of the expenses. Just taking measures, just reporting, it doesn't make sense. We have to see the cost benefit of this regulation, a regulation that contribute to have a healthy market. It's not deregulate because we need to deregulate, but to analyze what we have and to try to simplify things, going back, taking back the rationality of what we're doing. Yes, in financing, prevention of money laundering, how are we here? Costa Rica is a very interesting market for the influence of the American market. How do you, what about the impact in tourism, financing, the measures, the impact in Costa Rica is higher. I think we have a structure of regulation. We have CONACIF, and under that we have the insurance superintendents. We have SUHEF, bank, pensions, securities. In that structure, where we have been able very well to do Costa Rica is the standardization of criteria. And this brings very positive things, very negative things. In that standardization, corporate government and many other guidelines are very similar in the banks and in our institutions. But the problem is we are not financial institutions. We are insurers. So the rules that apply to us as insurance companies are exactly the same they apply to banks. So part of that 20% that I could say in Costa Rica, I think we for us is higher. It's big investment what they do, and it was impacted by the presentation of President Duque. Looking at the importance of this novel industry in the influence in our economies, placing money laundering issue where the risk is minimum goes against supervision based on risk because we are not applying the supervision where it should be in terms of risk. We're spending a lot of time to state internationally that we are doing it as everybody is doing it. And I don't think this is a fad. So the impact is very big. So we should dedicate this time, this investment in developing more the market to have this penetration, to develop products and so forth. It's an issue that it's urgent to change in this region and many of the regions of the rest of us who are here.
Many times the regulation, as Jorge was saying, is to look after the consumer of the insurance, right? We also have to look for the solvency of the company. That's something that you cannot leave behind. And what is interesting, or what I have as a message, as a tip here, as Luis Enrique said, Luis Enrique, is that you went from regulator, right? And then you went on the other side of the aisle, right? And you have that vision, right? Insurance company and regulator, right? And now supervisor. And you have consider insisting in simplifying the datification, and more accurately into products, right? And is that possible? I think it is. It's reasonable. Yes, it's reasonable. We have to go back into the rationality of it. The same as Kevin. Yes, I believe the participation that has made me uh, look into it. I wanted to resolve. We as insurers, the business of insurance was to have a smart understanding of the risk, right? Sometimes we forget that very important, and here the regulation also has to be smart so that it makes sense, right? And what I wanted to say was that it's important to be clear on the perspective of our value in the national economy. Sometimes I believe we don't know how to sell ourselves. We become very technical. We understand each other, but we don't know how to communicate with everybody else. And you have in the insurance, it makes you think, right, that there's something missing to make it more transcendental. And what I believe is that, for example, we have, in terms of the percentage that we represent from the GDP, very recently I heard AMIS in Mexico say that they were in 2.6% of the GDP. We went down. We regularly are in 2.5, and general average in Latin America was checking on it. It was 5%. In the developed countries, was double that. But I believe that the key concept here that we didn't take into consideration is that although we're going to say that we represent 5% of the GDP, that other 95% of the GDP wouldn't be possible without the 5% that we provide, because everything and that we have in construction, it's what gives availability, not to the total, but most of that, 95%. So we have to feel proud of what we are doing. We have to be aware of what we need to have a better sales of what is the relevance of the industry that we represent. I believe that we have done this, and the money laundering is symptomatic, right? We applied the insurance, so we don't know them, we don't understand it now, and do the same thing as you did for the banks. No, it makes no sense. And another thing was that, and I think that is measurable, and as Latinos, sometimes we go with flow, is we apply the same legislation that says regulation, and then in the regulation we go beyond that, what it says, the legislation. And then during the implementation, the companies, the compliance officers, gave more processes that go beyond what's being demanded. Well, and why? Well, it's just in case the regulator is going to ask you. But if the regulator is not asking you for it, why you have to do it? But it's really, truly the amount of procedures that we have with the banks, and just because, just in case there's something, right? And yeah, we had a huge rationality there, and everything that said. Kevin, I had to invest, a lot of my time in this thing about dedicating for what is really contributing, right, and to develop the market. That's why I feel that we're a little bit delay there. There was a study that CIDEX sponsored with the MAFRE Foundation, which is the insurable gap. And in most of the countries in Latin America, the insurable gap is double that. So we could have double of what we are doing now with almost nothing, doing almost nothing, because in damages, it's very tied down to the economic growth. But in people, there's a huge gap. So we are not working to reach that segment of the population, and we as regulator, we had to support the companies for this. This was easy, so that not everybody is fighting for the same part of the pie, right? That's the kind of development that we want to have, and to that we can, our industry has the right weight and acknowledgement that it deserves. Amazing to have a regulator like this, right? It's a, it's amazing. Well, yeah, you see everything. We sometimes have an excess of regulation, so then, and you have to do a smart regulation, right? Simplified regulation. We have to come to an end here, and some of the reflections that you want to say, and then we go to Kevin. And then since we in Surex and we do debates, we would like to know if somebody wants to consider something in a debate, because I think that this is a second edition because this is in this initiative, Fides is giving a clear message to the market, and it's a leader of positions that benefit everybody, right? Yes, yes. Final ideas. Okay, so I would start with what I said a moment ago, that at the end, that we have a mission, right? And is be part of the solution on public policy. And then we are called to do something, right? We are in a competitive market, right? So when we have the cost of the regulation, and that it translated into an increase on the premiums, or the other way around, right? And then, if given the competition, premiums should be smaller, and then we are not hiring the contractor because it turns out that it is not financially. I believe we have a huge challenge in trying to move forward in a structure and to be kind of efficient for the companies to take on these commercial processes and include more and more people into the world of the insured. What final message could we give to this audience? Well, the message I could give is that the freedom can lead to unrest, and I just want everybody to still be in to be in control, right? It happened to me a lot of years ago. My wife is sergeant with all of us, right? A drill sergeant with all of us. You're gonna meet her tonight. A beautiful woman, but a drill sergeant. And my three kids were always very educated. One weekend, my wife was out of the house, and I said, I'm gonna do an experiment here with the children. I took him on over the weekend, and the hotel where we were had a fan on the ceiling, and I said, my wife is always very organized. I took off my shoes, I turned on the fan, and I threw my socks to the fan, and the fan flew away. And my children look at me like, "What is going on here?" And they took off their shoes and their socks, and socks were flying all around the room, and the pillows, and the room was a disaster. And then my eldest daughter looked at me and said, "Dad, I don't like this type of attitude. This is a mess." And so the message is that it's not on one side or the other, but we do have to let the let them, develop and not put them in a straitjacket. Thank you very much. So as I said at the beginning, right, it's an amazing panel member, and now we open it to any person that wants to talk. Anybody, the technical advisors here. We have a mic over here, Jose Luis. Hi, good morning. A great forum because it's very important. I'm gonna talk in behalf of a stakeholder that is not here, which are the brokers. And the brokers, same as the insurance companies, have to fulfill all the regulation. And so imagine, Mr. Luis, for the insurance companies, if we say that they are big companies, renewal companies, for the brokers that are all sizes, and applies the same thing for all of us, right? Yeah, we are aware of that, and definitely in the original regulation, everybody was together. And this change that we are doing, we are separating it, right? There's a group A, which are the insurance underwriters and everybody else, and then there's a B group, it's the brokers, whom will be applied something that is going to be a lot easier, a lot less complicated to find that rationality, right? Yeah, because many times in the in-depth analysis of the insurance, like Kevin said, right, we are not able to do it because we are working on tasks that are not the commercialization of the insurance. We have to focus on covering all the regulations. When a customer arrives and their requirements to get an insurance is expensive than the insurance itself, they say, I don't want it. And all of that affects us, right? And I would like to know something very important, right? And rationality of what it needs to be done. And I believe that's important, right? And we are very highly regulated. And in a sector that you mentioned, for example, maybe life and causations about, I don't think somebody's going to get a construction insurance to then turn down the building when it's 80% done. So I want to congratulate you for that initiatives and to not only apply it to the neighbors here, but all of Latin America, so that we can have a greater understanding of this part of the penetration of the insurance and dedicate to what we do. Anyone else would like to say something? Thank you very much for the panel. It's music to my ears, and I love the position of the regulator. This proposal includes what's happening with the insurance companies, right? If you see the board of directors, many of you are part of board of directors, but in the board of directors, how much time it's spent to talk about strategy is very minimum compared to the time to the regulatory process. And it's precisely where we need to make sure that we have the development of insurance in our countries. And anything that has to be taken into consideration, such as headcount, and it's very limiting because we put in terms of compliance that could have an impact in the business. So yes, just to tell you that that this initiative um, and right now through your activity in Panama, this can spread to the rest of the meeting to include better practices. This really needs the requirement for FIDES, right? And to make sure that we do another survey. Yes. Yes, you are right, right? And we change the corporate agreement and try to give it more responsibility. But overnight, now you are responsible for everything. You have to overlook everything. You have to supervise everything, and that's not possible. Thank you. And same. I'm talking about in behalf of somebody else, somebody that is not here. Okay. And Rodriguez from Plusa, Chile. And more than a question, is a reflection. It's a very inspiring, this analysis that are happening, because as a staff member in the insurance company, we are we're looking into the excessive regulation and the cost that it means for the company. We are very aware and as long as these modifications and regulations exist, then it will be very hopeful to hear. In one way or another, this is going to flow and change the regulation for the brokers as well as those of us that do technical analysis, and also on the participation, those of us that participate in the insurance market. So more than a question, this is a reflection and a comment, I know, with hope. I believe there's hope for us. Thank you. Okay, very good. So it's been a pleasure once again. We will come back to this with Fides at some point. Yes, and an applause, please, an applause for the panel.